We head into this newscast with all the latest coming in from Afghanistan. A prominent Afghan women's leader has escaped an assassination attempt. Fawzia Khufi was the first women deputy speaker of the parliament in Afghanistan. The attack was condemned by Afghanistan's president as well as senior politicians involved in the peace process. Fawzia Khufi is a staunch advocate of women's and girls' rights, starting her public career in 2001, shortly after the ouster of the Taliban, by campaigning for girls' education. The attack came as Afghanistan announced that it will be forming a new council to safeguard women's rights and interests amid fears that peace talks with the Taliban could erode the freedoms won by women. President Ashraf Ghani has said that the council would empower women, promote their rights at home and even implement Afghanistan's international commitments to women's rights. The move came a day after a coalition of women's rights activists wrote to Ghani, demanding a place in the historic talks with the terrorist group that once banished women from public life. The activists said that they will not allow their place and contribution towards rebuilding Afghanistan to be reversed. The United States and the Taliban reached a peace deal in February this year, but many Afghan women worry that it does not include adequate safeguards for their rights. They fear a US troop withdrawal, the winding down of international engagement and re-emergence of the Taliban in politics that could destroy hard-won gains women have made since 2001 when the Taliban rule ended. Under the Taliban rule in Afghanistan, all women and girls were discriminated. They were treated with no respect under Taliban's version of Islamic Sharia law. Between the 1990s and until the 2001 intervention, women were snatched of their fundamental rights. No woman was allowed to get an education and they had no access to health care. They were banned from considering a profession and were not allowed to work. Each time a woman wanted to step out, she had to be accompanied by a male family member. If a person disobeyed these stringent laws, then punishment that followed was extremely harsh. They were either flogged, beaten or stoned to death if found guilty. Even now, Taliban controls a huge area of Afghanistan and will soon be starting their talks with the Ghani government in Qatar. Let's get in a sense of perspective on this news story, and for that I'm joined in by our guest Mariam Wardak, who's an activist and founder of Her Afghanistan, an organization working for the welfare of women in Afghanistan. Let's quickly go across to Mariam. Mariam, a very warm welcome to you. Let me begin by stating that Fawzia Khufi is part of a 21-member team which will represent the Afghan government in the upcoming peace talks with the Taliban. Considering there have been targeted attacks on Fawzia and on senior civil society members in the recent months, what do you make of the timing of this assassination attempt?
Well, allow me to provide a clear picture of what is going on. The Afghan Taliban have rejected that they had any part in the assassination. This is a very sensitive time where the Afghan government, based on the consultative lawyer Jirga, agreed to release the 400 prisoners that they had, and only 80 of them thus far has been released. The reason why the 400 were not released at that time is because those were the criminals that had committed the most heinous attacks in Afghanistan. And now that the peace process is going to initiate with the intra-Afghan negotiations, I'm sure there are many who are going to be spoilers in this event. Fawzia Khufi is an active and vocal female empowerment symbol in Afghanistan, and it's very unfortunate what has happened to her. Our organization, along with a few others, have mentioned that attacks on women happen on a regular basis. Fawzia Khufi is not the first one who's had an attack. We've had Shukriya Baraksai. We've had recently, I believe about 2 years ago, an Afghan journalist named Meena Mangal was shot by an unknown gunman. So women being killed or attacked by firearms is starting to become a common trend in Afghanistan.
Right. Mariam, the assassination attempt on Fawzia Khufi shifts the spotlight back on women's safety in Afghanistan. Will the peace deal be able to safeguard the rights of Afghan women?
Well, the peace deal is not available to anybody to understand, and I don't even believe that it's drafted. But having 5 women I would have hoped to have more, but if having 5 strong women, especially one who understands theology, such as Fatima Gilani, one who's a strong advocate, such as Fawzia Koofi, and a few others, they are going to be the protectors who are going to look into the best interests of females and the whole country as a whole. So yes, women's rights or women's freedom in general is always at jeopardy. This did not only start during the Taliban era, but this was during the Mujahideen civil war that we had in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, women have always had the short end of the stick, to say the least.
Right. Also, Mariam, for a country which has had a history of women warriors, especially if one were to focus on the Second Afghan Anglo War of 1879, why is Afghanistan still struggling with women's empowerment?
Well, if we have to understand the Second Afghan Anglo War, which was Malala of Maiwand, where she was a 15-year-old girl, daughter of a shepherd, who was helping out with the war by providing water and equipment to the sick. She realized how they were demoralized and took off her scarf and said some words that empowered all the men to fight, and that's how we were able to combat that war. Right now, Afghan women are the same. They are strong, they send out powerful messages, and they're the ones who are the glue in Afghanistan. They're farmers, they're electricians, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're lawyers. Women are very strong, and I don't believe that women will stand back this time. This is not the Afghanistan that we had in the 90s. These are not the women who had to bear everything. These women have been able to access empowerment in many different forms, whether it was financial or psychological in any way. Now they know what should be rightfully theirs, not only for their own security, but the security of their families.
Right. Do you think the peace deal can actually manage to focus on women, and how important is it for the peace deal to also include women and their rights?
I think the peace deal is going to focus on how we can reintegrate within one another, especially since this war has dragged on for so long. I think that the women aspect, it's going to be human rights in general that we're going to look at, and how we don't violate human rights. And then one of the components is that women, since now Afghanistan has fought in so many ways, it's not a patriarchal society. It's a matriarchal society. There are mothers who are running the homes. So they have a larger stake here. And women have to be looked upon. I believe the Afghan Taliban cannot enforce such laws that they did before, such as always have a male companion with you when you're going outside. Because as women, as matriarchs, they're the ones who are bringing the financial incentives into their homes.
Right, Mariam. Thank you so much for sharing your precious inputs and bringing us your perspective on this broadcast.
Thank you.